what's up? Today, I'm gonna show you the moves that I use to make exceptionally creamy and flavor-dense hummus at home, along with a super easy recipe for pita that literally anyone can make. To get started on the pita dough, I'll grab my stand mixer, and into the bowl of that, I'll combine 265 grams of warm water, 50 grams of olive oil, 8 grams of instant yeast, 15 grams of sugar, 450 grams of bread flour, and then 10 grams of salt. Next, I'll add on the dough hook and then mix this dough on low speed for 2 minutes, or until it starts to form somewhat of a cohesive mass like this. From there, I'll turn this mixer up to high speed and then mix the dough for 4 more minutes. With pita, we have to be really careful not to overdevelop the dough, especially when using higher gluten flour like bread flour. That's because an overly strengthened dough will lead to a pita that's tough and chewy as opposed to flaky and tender. Of course, to determine if the dough has enough strength to hold itself together, I'll stop the mix, give it a firm tug, and if there's no tearing or shearing, it's ready to rip. Next, I'll cut the dough into 6 even pieces that are about 130 grams apiece. And from there, I'll drop a piece onto a lightly floured cutting board. I'll pull out 2 sides and fold those over each other. Then I'll pull out 2 more, fold again, and then the dough is going to get flipped onto those seams, and then I'll use the palm of my hand and my fingertips to roll this into a nice ball. But since this dough isn't super strong, we do need to add just a little bit more tension by sealing up the little anus thing on the bottom. I'll just pinch that shut, and yeah, there we go, a tidy little pita ball. Next, I'll move all 6 of these balls over to a lightly oiled sheet tray, and then I'll wrap it tightly with plastic wrap. Finally, I'll move this dough over to the fridge to cold ferment for as little as 4 hours, but preferably overnight. Doing the main fermentation in the fridge gets me more depth of flavor without excessive gas production. If we fermented this dough at room temperature, it would be super gassy and wouldn't make a tidy round pita. It'd be more like Roman style pizza bianca. Now, since these doughs are going to be rising overnight, I'll also go ahead and soak my beans for the hummus. For that, of course, I've got some bonzos. To prep these, I'll add in 1 pound's worth or 450 grams into a high-sided container and then cover those with 2 kilos or about 2 quarts of water. I'll give these a quick stir and then I'll soak them overnight. The next day when I check back, these beans are nice and swollen and ready to cook. So to do that, I'll grab my pressure cooker and then load in all of the soaked beans along with the 2 kilos of soaking liquid, and then I'll add in 7 to 8 grams of baking soda. This soda is going to raise the pH of the cooking solution, making it more basic, and that's going to both dissolve the skins on the beans and it's going to break down the pectin in the beans, making them much softer than if we had cooked them without. The combination of fibrous bean skin and insufficiently tender beans are usually the 2 things that stand in the way of an ultra smooth hummus. Next, I'll pop on the lid and cook these beans under high pressure for 90 minutes. And if you're wondering, hey Bri, what if you don't want to cook your own garbanzos? Well, of course, you could use canned beans. You just need to remove the skins of those first. To do that, I'll throw them into a bowl, fill that with water, and then shake the beans to loosen as much of the skin as possible. The skins should float to the top where you could just skim them right off. This won't get all of them, but it'll get a pretty high percentage. And once we have relatively skin-free beans, I'll add in 7 grams of baking soda and then move this pot over to the stove to cook it for 30 to 40 minutes or until the beans are quite a bit more tender. These canned beans will give you something that is totally usable and will make great hummus, but if you want ultimate creaminess, I still recommend cooking your own. In total, you'll need 1,250 grams of mushy canned beans to make this hummus. Now, while my pressure cooker beans are getting destroyed in this Instant Pot, I'll move it out of the way so that I can bust out my pita. For that, I'll grab my tray of overnight dough balls from the fridge, and then I'll preheat my oven to 425F. Now to roll this pita, I'll lightly flour my cutting board, drop my dough, I'll flour it, and from there I'll use a flat hand to spread the dough out into a roughly 4-inch circle. This also helps degas the dough so it doesn't rise weird in the oven. Next, I'll grab my rolling pin and give this dough some nondescript rolling to make it wider and flatter. From there, I'll turn it 90 degrees and repeat. Try to keep the board and the dough well dusted with flour as you go here, because if you tear or crease the surface of the pita, it won't puff into a pocket like we're looking for. Also, we don't want to go too thin here because that will make for a crusty, dry pita. And conversely, we don't want to go too thick because that pita is going to be more like bread. That product is still delicious, but it's not exactly pita. So once this is about 1/8 of an inch thick and roughly 9 inches across like this, it's time to bake it. But first, I'll need to brush off any excessive flour. If there's too much flour on the outside, the pita will feel sandy and powdery in your mouth. Next, I'll grab my pizza peel and shimmy it under the dough, making sure it's not stuck. And then I'll load the dough into the oven onto my pizza steel or stone. And then I'll quickly thank Athletic Greens for sponsoring this part of the video. As most of you know by now, I've been drinking AG1 by Athletic Greens for over a year as part of my morning routine of things that make me feel good. Wake up, AG1, gym, sauna, cold shower, meditate, and coffee. I almost exclusively drink decaf coffee now, so I love that AG1 gives me a nice sustained boost of energy, starting with my workout through being on my feet all day filming cooking videos. Each scoop of AG1 is 9 health products in one, giving you the equivalent of a multivitamin, probiotic, minerals, and more. It has key nutrients from whole food sourced ingredients to help support things like heart health, digestion, immune system, and energy, and it's the best tasting and most comprehensive nutritional drink that I've found, making it a very easy habit to stick to. Give AG1 a try and get a free immunity bundle with your purchase if you use my link down in the description. That's 5 free AG1 travel packs and a year's supply of vitamin D3 K2 drops, which I also take every day. Again, just go to athleticgreens.com/Brian Lagerstrom to claim a free immunity bundle with your purchase. Now, while Pita 1 is baking and puffing in the oven, I'm going to start rolling out my second dough ball. You can get all of these pitas in and out of the oven in about 15 minutes if you roll while you bake. And after about 90 seconds to 2 minutes, I'm going to come back, check on this pita, and give it a quick flip. I'll throw it back on my pizza steel and cook it for another 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Keep these a little bit on the blonde side because if we go too dark, they'll get leathery and dry pretty fast. And after 3 to 4 minutes in total, both sides have caught some light browning and the pita is cooked through. So I'll move this over to a bowl that I've lined with a tea towel to keep it warm and steam the outside a little bit, almost like a tortilla. From here, I'll finish up baking the rest of these pitas. That'll take 10 minutes or so. And once I've got all 6 baked off, I'm gonna wrap them up with the tea towel and move them over to the stove to keep warm while I make the hummus. For that, I'll grab my pressure cooker, and as a reminder, I cook these chickpeas for 90 minutes under high pressure and then let that pressure release naturally for 20. As you can see, these are super soft, but they're not disintegrated. If they were that soft, they'd be waterlogged, and that would make an overly thin hummus. From here, I'll drain off the cooking liquid through a fine mesh strainer, and then I'll come back with a spoon to move these around and press them a bit to remove any extra juiciness. We want to control the amount of liquid that goes into this hummus, and that means starting with a relatively dry bean. We can always add liquid later on, but of course, we can't take it out. Now, once these are very well drained and not wet, I'll move these over to my food processor. Whoa! They came out as one huge mass. That's weird. Next, I'll add in 300 grams of tahini, 20 grams of salt, 60 grams of fresh lemon juice, and then optionally but recommended is 4 to 5 grams of citric acid. I got mine at the International Grocery Store, but of course you can get it on Amazon, and I'll link to it down in the description. If you haven't used citric acid before, it's essentially the stuff that they use to make candy sour. It tastes like somebody distilled the acidity out of a lemon and then crystallized it.
Brian!
Don't swallow it.
It's an amazing way to up the tartness of something without diluting it with extra water. Now, once everything's in the chopper, I'll pop on my lid and spin it for 3 whole minutes. And after 3 minutes, I'll come back and pop the lid and check it out. This is definitely not ready to serve, but it's pretty frickin' smooth as it is. At this point, there's no perceivable texture, but it sits kind of heavy on the tongue and it's just not creamy or luxurious yet. To get it there, I'll start spinning it one more time and then grab 50 grams of extra virgin olive oil and stream that in. Streaming the oil in after the beans are well pureed helps emulsify it almost like a creamy salad dressing, and it keeps the oil from getting overly bitter. Pureeing does that to olive oil. Once the oil's in, I'll grab 90 to 125 grams of ice cubes and add those in one at a time. Using ice over water to thin this out helps incorporate more air into the emulsion, making it even creamier, similar to ice cream. I say 90 to 120 grams of ice because the absorption of your beans will be different than mine, so you'll have to use your judgment. And there we go. An amazingly creamy texture. But the final step is to taste the hummus for seasoning. How's the salt, the acidity? Is it as creamy as it could possibly be? Mine's pretty close, but to make it perfect, I'm gonna add in a small squeezer of lemon, 2 to 3 grams of salt, and then a fat drizzle of olive oil. That's gonna loosen things up a little bit and make it a touch rounder and softer on the palate. A quick 10-second blitz to mix all that together, and I'll call it good. You guys, for me, this is the perfect hummus texture. It's soft and spreadable, but not quite saucy. As for the pita, it's still standing by, nice and hot. It's tender, flaky, a touch sweet, and has a deep, yeasty bread flavor. Plus, there's a little bit of crust on the outside from being cooked on that hot steel. To plate this up, I'll throw a few dollops onto a plate and then use the back of my spoon to spread it out while turning the plate to get a nice presentation and to make a well for my garnishes. Today, that's going to be a metric ton of fresh, bright green tasting olive oil. Then I'll top that with a few pinches of sumac to bring some color contrast and little tiny pops of sour. And then finally, I'll hit the top with some flaky, crunchy salt to bring pops of salinity to every other bite. And for me, you guys, that's perfect hummus. It's so freaking creamy, it's luxurious, and there's no perceivable grit or grain on your tongue. It's just soft. Pair that with some fluffy, chewy, tender pita, and yeah, it's good. If you guys like Middle Eastern recipes and want to learn more, I really like Obi over at Middle Eats on YouTube. Check out his videos. He's way more of an authority on this type of food than I am, and his hummus video in particular really helped me figure out my own version of hummus. I hope you guys try this one soon. Let me know in the comments how it goes. Let's eat this thing!